Hello and welcome to the First Right Podcast, your weekly dose of conservative news brought to you by Restoration of America. I'm your host, Hayden Ludwig, Research Director for Restoration News. Be sure to find our work at restoration-news.com. This week we're joined by Ned Ryun, founder of American Majority and a seasoned strategist to train patriots on how to run for office and how to build a winning get-out-the-vote effort to combat the left's political machine. Ned, thanks for joining the show.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Great to be with you.
Now, give us the 30,000-foot view of the 2024 battlefield as it stands. What exactly has changed with Kamala at the top of the ticket instead of Joe Biden?
I think they've been able to change the narrative. I mean, the whole thing is completely messed up, that they took out the incumbent president and put in somebody that didn't even get a delegate in the 2020 primary. Very highly questionable behavior, but again, never underestimate Democrats' one guiding moral light, and I mean that with the greatest sarcasm, is gaining and retaining political power. They will bend, break rules, laws, whatever it takes to try and hold on to that power. So here we are with Kamala. It's allowed them to change the narrative. They don't have to defend grandpa dementia anymore. Obviously, his inability to actually function, which is a whole other question, by the way, of why she's the candidate and he's still in the White House. If he's incapable of being the nominee, why is he still in the White House as president? Because he's clearly incapable physically and cognitively to perform either of those duties. But it's allowed them to change the narrative. It's given them, in some ways, a breath of fresh air that somehow they can change the narrative. You know, we've seen some numbers, especially among young people, that Kamala might galvanize them a lot more than Biden would have. At the end of the day, though, it's still exactly where I thought we'd be in January of 2023. I didn't care who was on top of the ticket, whether it was Biden or Kamala. I thought it would come down to 6 or 7 battleground states. I thought it would be razor-thin margins in all of those states, one way or the other. And it would come down to the ballot chase. Who's better at chasing in all the ballots and then turning out the mid to low propensity voters who don't have a ballot, but getting them to go vote early in person. So I think we're exactly in August of 2024 where I thought we'd be in January, sitting there in January of 2023. And it's going to come down to who has a better ballot collection machine to win these battleground states.
So before we get into the absentee ballot machines, I do want to talk about that extensively, but let's go back to something you mentioned with Biden's cognitive abilities here. So I've heard a lot of people say that Kamala ought to take over his place and run from that, but surely that would make the Republican position more difficult for messaging if she was President Kamala Harris already.
I would actually argue it's to our benefit that they haven't done that. I don't disagree with you at all. It's just one of those things that if this person is cognitively incapable, and he's incapacitated on a whole host of fronts, why is he still in the White House? And again, they've just made the calculation. They think this is better for them, how they're doing this, for them to hold on to political power. So whatever the decision, the rationale has been, they don't really care. Biden to them, it's kind of an afterthought, which I have to tell you, in the situation we are in the world right now, it should be disconcerting for all Americans. We're not entirely sure who's actually running the White House right now, and who is able to address some of these issues that are taking place, whether it's in the Middle East or other parts of the world.
So let's talk about the absentee ballots. A lot of conservatives are very understandably mistrusting of absentee ballots and voting by mail after the 2020 election. But you lean and point out that don't look at the polls. We need to trust these things, and we need to actually build our own conservative turnout machine. What does that even look like?
Correct. So the fact of the matter is you might not like the rules of the game. You might resent the rules of the game. You might even have questions about the rules of the game as to whether there might be fraud or some of these other games that people that are unethical might play. The fact of the matter is the rules of the game are as such. And of course, they're not changing. These are the rules we'll play under. There will be absentee ballots in a lot of these states, most of these states. There will be early in-person voting starting 50 days out in Pennsylvania, 45 days out in Virginia. Ballots are dropping September 6th in North Carolina. So the fact of the matter is, if you do not play this game by these rules, you put yourself behind the 8 ball. You are giving the other side a significant advantage by not focusing on, for a whole host of reasons, which I'll explain, in embracing this. embracing these rules. And one of the things, so let's take, for example, Arizona. What we're doing in Arizona right now with American Majority Action, before ballots drop on October 9th and early in-person voting starts that exact same day, we are trying to build out the ballot universe to get mid to low propensity Republicans who we're not entirely sure will show up on election day to request a ballot. It should increase their odds of voting up to about 80%. If you request a ballot of your own volition, of course, we can't request one for you, so somebody has to request that ballot when we encourage them to do so. The odds of them voting go up significantly, and you've taken a mid to low prop voter and turned them into a very likely voter. So it's trying to increase the ballot universe because you're also increasing your vote universe. Well, we're also trying to encourage people, and I just did an op-ed at American Greatness a few weeks ago, the economics of early voting, in which I'm trying to explain to people American Majority Action, Susan B. Anthony List, a lot of these outside groups that do voter contact, you will save us a lot of money if the minute the ballot drops, you turn around and send it in. That'll probably cost us $10, $12 total in the whole process. If you decide in the first week or two of early in-person voting, I'm going to go vote, probably costs us about $20. And by that, I mean, this is phone calls. These are texts, maybe a postcard reminder, maybe digital, maybe a door knock. All of these things start to add up in the cost. If you decide that you are not going to vote until election day because of whatever reason, you will cost up to $100 for your vote because people are not going to let you not vote. They're going to continue to pursue you in hopes they can get that vote in the bag before election day. If you decide to wait until election day, you literally could be costing outside groups like us or the Trump campaign, whoever, 10 times as much for your vote as if you had just voted early. So what we've been trying to do is increase the ballot universe, especially among mid to low props, and then encourage those, if you don't want to vote by mail, that's fine. A lot of these states, it can be, upwards of 50 days out, depending on the state laws, that you can go vote early in person. You will save your candidate and your side a lot of money. Embrace the rules. And once we win this game by these rules, we can have a conversation about what the rules should look like moving forward. And this is
Yes.
one thing that people have to get their heads around. You cannot change the rules of the game if you do not have the political power to change those rules. And the only way you're going to gain political power is playing the game by these rules laid out right now.
So to explain it a little more simplistically for people who've never heard of this program before, it's not enough simply to get Republicans to register to vote, which is obviously the basic
Correct.
step there. It's not
But
even
it's good.
enough to just make sure that they get absentee ballots. We also have to spend money with a political turnout machine to make sure they fill
Correct.
those ballots out properly and turn them in if they're not voting in person.
So I tell people, once you've done all your work to get the ballot universes built out, and I would argue in a robust absentee ballot program, which includes generation and chase, voter
Hmm.
registration is absolutely a part of that. You want to increase your voter universe. You would like to see a lot of those first timers will be very active in the first election that they've registered to vote. I would like to see more of them, especially where there's permanent absentee ballot lists like Arizona, like Michigan. Go ahead and request that ballot, be on the permanent absentee ballot list. It'll make my life easier in the future if the rules stay the same. But the chase, then for example, let me explain how the chase is going to look in Arizona. In Arizona, October 9th, ballots drop. Early in-person voting starts. It will become a series of highly targeted, because we know exactly where all of those absentee ballots have been mailed to. It will become a series of targeted harassments. It'll be a postcard reminder, a series of live calls, followed up by a series of text, followed up by a series of door knocks, digital, everything increasing in intensity. We're hoping that we can, obviously, at the very beginning, jog those ballots loose with maybe some live calls, maybe a postcard reminder, maybe a few texts. Right. And then after maybe a week or so, you're trying to reevaluate, all right, who's still out there? And again, the list keeps on shrinking day by day by day. Do we need to have more high intensity contact, i.e. door knocks? And then you start to increase that as well. Like you're doing more and more to where you have to have 7 to 9 at a minimum high quality contacts. Some people,
Wow.
Youngkin's campaign claimed 40 in Virginia that they needed to do that. That
Wow.
included emails, that included digital impressions, that included a
Okay, so
whole
let me
host of
just make
other
sure
things.
people understood that. So the Youngkin campaign had to contact people as many as 40 times to get Republicans to turn their ballots in.
But I don't yes, but I don't consider those all high quality contacts. I mean,
Sure.
again, if you're including digital impressions, some robocalls or whatever, that's what they included. When I talk about 7 to 9 high quality contacts, I'm including live phone calls, getting somebody on the phone who has a ballot or leaving a voice message saying, we know you have a ballot, we'd like you to return it. A door knock or two or three, God forbid. Hopefully, we don't have to do 3 door knocks on some of these folks because it starts to add up. Peer-to-peer texting, so there's more of a personal contact. So
Hmm.
yeah, it does take for these mid to low props sometimes 7 to 9 high quality contacts as you're layering in digital and some other stuff to just reinforce, hey, you have a ballot, it's election season, get out there and vote, return your ballot.
And to your point with the economics, people can see why A, you need to have this machine in place long before 45 to 60
Correct.
days out, but also how
Yes.
much money this costs and why donors shouldn't be putting all their money into political ads per se, but also into building this kind of permanent turnout machine that lasts for every 2-year
Correct.
cycle, not just the
Yes.
2024 election.
I mean, this is the one thing where I think, let's take Florida, for example. All right. Florida decided about 6 years ago, when DeSantis and Rick Scott won that very close 2018 election, we are going to make year after year investments in voter registration and generating more ballots among mid to low props. So for the last 6 years, every year they have spent millions doing voter registration and doing absentee ballot generation. So now, guess what? Florida is no longer a battleground state, but it takes a long-term commitment and investment into these right things, to the correct things that are a permanent asset for the future. So this is going to be my argument. I'm optimistic. It's going to be hard. We've got about 12 weeks until election day. It's going to be a hard fought battle. The left is not going to roll over. They have clearly gone all in with 2 socialists at the top of the ticket. And they are not going to roll over and just accept the fact that Donald Trump's going to get into the White House for the second term because they view the administrative state and all these things as their golden calf. It's an existential threat to their way of doing business, as it were. So we've got to win this election. And when we do, we have to commit to the next 4 years in some of these key battleground states of saying, we're going to invest not a few $100,000 every year into every state for voter registration, 7 figures. We're also going to have to invest probably a similar figure where there are permanent absentee ballot lists, same process. Arizona, Michigan, other states like that. We're going to build out the ballot universe among mid to low prop registered Republicans so that when it comes time for the midterms and the next presidential, we have that many more assets that will be of huge value to whoever's on top of the ticket.
So, what role does party registration advantage play in states like Arizona?
I mean, it's a good indicator, obviously, of who's doing the right things and where you think you've got, advantages in regards to D versus R. For example, on the permanent
Right.
absentee ballot list, the AEVL in Arizona, beginning of the year, I can't quite remember what the advantage was R over D, but it was probably 30, 40,000. We bumped it to 55,000 by doing an absentee ballot generation push in March.
Wow.
And then we did another push into May through pretty much end of June, middle of July, added another 20,000.
And so
So
people
last I,
understand that's 75,000 more registered
correct,
Republicans than Democrats in Arizona.
that will that will be receiving a absentee ballot on October 9th. So again, I've described it as we're in an arms race right now with the left. And the arms race is who's going to create more ballots, who's going to create more new voters before registration deadlines in these given states. So these are worthwhile investments. We're continuing to do. Susan B. Anthony's doing some good work in Arizona through the month of July on absentee ballot generation. We've been doing some more slow burn with American Majority Action. I know Restoration has been doing some work as well. We've been doing the similar work in North Carolina and Wisconsin, more on a slow burn front. But yeah, when it comes time for this, we need to make sure these are the numbers that count to me. As you mentioned, people talk about poll numbers. I think poll numbers are a good weather forecast at a given moment in time that might or might not be true 12 weeks from now. The only
Yes.
numbers that I truly care about, how big is your ballot universe? How big is your partisan registration advantage? Those are the numbers that count. And then obviously, do you have the machinery in place to be able to utilize and maximize whatever advantage that you've been able to build up to get back? I have to tell you, there's something magical about getting 80% of your absentee ballots in. It's a really good indication. We did 7 state Senate races here in Virginia last year. We hit over 80% in 5 of the 7, and guess which ones were victories? Those 5. There's something about hitting 80% at a minimum, although I've let people know I think we're going to have to hit 82, 83% at a minimum in these states on ballot return for us to win, because I fully expect the left to pull out any and all stops, legal or illegal, in trying to win on November 5th, including getting non-citizens registered to vote, getting those ballots in, and we don't realize that till it's too late. So we have to have a tsunami of Republican ballots in these battleground states, people showing up the minute early in-person voting starts. Because the other thing, too, that I want to emphasize, it's not only about numbers and obviously pursuing all those things, it's about how do you control the narrative in those 60 days before the election, right? September 6th,
Absolutely.
ballots drop in North Carolina. There is definitely psychological warfare going on in regards to narratives in which people start talking about, oh, look, in the early voting numbers, Democrats are up by 10 points. In regards to ballot return, they're beating Republicans by 10 or 15 points. We have to fight that psychological battle and fight that narrative coming down the home stretch to show, oh, Republicans and Democrats neck and neck on ballot return, neck and neck on early voting, because guess what happens on election day? By overwhelming margins, Republicans usually crush Democrats on election day voting. So the idea is to keep the narrative in a very positive way, not to lose that narrative, not for that psychological impact to hit our base, and then go into election day and have a robust get out the vote process on election day as well, to then definitively, hopefully, seal the deal.
Now, Ned, back in 2020, obviously, you and American Majority were aware of this. We were both aware of the left's vast machinery they'd been building for at least a decade and a half to do this kind of absentee ballot chasing on the other side with Democratic voters. It sure seems to me that looking back at 2020, we on the right were fighting with not just one, but both hands tied behind our back. Yeah. Honestly, it's amazing we win anything at the national or statewide level. What was it like in 2020 in contrast to what you're building right now? How much were people aware of this? How much were donors aware of this?
I have to tell you, there have been a lot of us who didn't realize it until too late. Zuckbucks, Center for Tech and Civic Life, where, again, if I had done that through American Majority, I wouldn't be talking to you. I'd probably still be in prison. C3, I mean, they were investing money into battleground states, into blue counties to boost the blue vote, with the thinnest of veneer of legality, sometimes by a margin of $10 to 1. And when I look back at 2020, this is why people should have hope, because 2020 was really decided by about 43,000 votes between Arizona, Georgia, and Wisconsin. If those states had gone to Trump, it would have been a tie in the Electoral College, gone to the House of Representatives, and Trump would have won re-election, right? We had that advantage in the House if there had been a tiebreaker. Yes. When I think about how razor thin 2020 was and all of the stops that they pulled out, and I do think I think 2020, because of a whole host of dynamics, was the Democrats' high water mark in regards to everything they were able to pull off. I don't know if they can quite pull off in 2024 what they pulled off in 2020. First of all, because we're actually a bit wiser to what they were doing. In a lot of states, some of this stuff has been made illegal. But I will say this, they're not going to stop. I mean, they just brought the unsecured ballot drop boxes back in Wisconsin. So it just is one of those things where people should have hope. It was razor thin in 2020. We've learned a lot. We've put in place some things that were not there even in the midterms that I think is going to definitely level the playing field on a whole host of fronts to give us what I think is the chance for Donald Trump to win on November 5th.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the wild card here as we close out, of course, is non-citizen voting, including by illegal aliens.
Correct.
We know this is a factor. There's been great statistics done on the 3 to 4 million illegal aliens who vote every single presidential election. Of course, the numbers are probably going to be far higher with the 20 million or so illegal aliens living in the country right now. What effect is this going to have on the presidential election in November?
I think significant. I mean, myself and others have been deeply concerned about, because again, if I was an unethical leftist political operative, I would be shipping, 100,000 of these into every one of these key battleground states, trying to get 20 or 30,000 of them registered votes, slipping through the cracks to get those ballots collected. But you're right, this has been going on for a long time. I would remind people in 2014, there was a academic study done by Old Dominion and George Mason, both in Virginia, on the 2008 elections in regards to non-citizens voting. According to their estimates, and again, it's hard to pin it down because that's the point. The left is trying to take advantage of some loopholes. They think it was potentially over 2.5, I think 2.7 million non-citizens that actually did vote in the 2008 presidential elections.
Wow.
Overwhelming percentage, of course, for Obama and Democrats.
Yep,
And think of where we
80-20,
are.
actually.
Right. Think of where we are 16 years later. Think of where we are just after 4 years of the Biden administration. I mean, I think 11 to 12 million is a low figure, right? I think that's
Yes.
the low figure of illegals that have come in. And yeah, if I was unethical, my one moral guiding light was political power. I mean, yeah, sure. I'd be
Well, and
doing
let's
the
not
same
forget,
thing on the
too,
left because they're going for power.
let's not forget, too, there's 50 million plus non-citizens. It's not only illegal aliens, it's people living here legally who think that they can vote because they've got a green card, right? I mean, there's a huge tranche of people that the left can tap into.
And I made this point showing the Medicaid form out of Arizona, in which if you can't prove your citizenship or we can't find proof of it at the DMV, don't worry. We'll send you a federal-only ballot so you can go ahead and vote in these elections. Like,
Yes.
You mean for president, Senate, and House? Are you insane? There's the thing that I would argue, again, when Donald Trump wins November 5th, and hopefully we keep the House majority and take the Senate majority, we've got to go back and explore the 1993 Motor Voter Act. There were a lot of things put in place in that piece of legislation that are poison pill for us, for our country, and actually putting in some legal requirements where people in Arizona have said, we're actually legally required to do some of these things. We got to go back and re-explore that Motor Voter Act and say, we're redoing all of this as we're deporting, as we're redoing census, all of these things, because there are a lot of things put in place that have really rigged this game against us and in favor of the left.
And to be clear, I mean, back in May, almost every single House Democrat voted against a bill that would have required proof of citizenship to register to vote anywhere in the country. They absolutely support this, whether they're obvious or not about it.
Yeah, no, they're lying when they say this. It's illegal. They would never do this. They are flat out lying and being disingenuous because we know for a fact this does happen. And the question is, on what level will it happen in 2024? And hopefully we will be able to stop a lot of it before it happens, because once it happens, it's baked in that cake. There's no unbaking that.
Ned, last question. What can people do to support you in American Majority?
They can be a part of our field efforts. Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, North Carolina. We're going to start doing some stuff in Minnesota. They can check us out. Obviously, American Majority Actions website's the best place to go if they want to be involved in that effort. But I would also encourage them post-election, be involved with our trainings. We're training people not only to run for state and local office, we're also training them how to become more sophisticated in how they can organize permanent assets and infrastructure so they can cause change in their communities. Enough communities change, they change the state. You change enough states, you change the country. But it requires really focused, metric-driven approach to doing that. So that's what we do at American Majority. We train people how to run for office. We train them how to be better activists. And I would strongly encourage people, the time is now, right now, to be involved in a higher level. So join us at American Majority Action. But post November 5th, the fight is on, right? Just because we win an election, I think you have to have political power for 12 years for there to be real change that takes place. The battle will just be joined if we win on November 5th.
What is that website to go to?
AM Action, I believe it's am-action.org. AmericanMajority.org is our C3 site. And check us out. Check out what we do. I think we've been doing a lot of good work over the years, and we're going to continue to do more.
Well, Ned, this has been extremely enlightening. Thank you for your time and what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Appreciate it. Thank you.
And thank you, folks, for tuning in and supporting conservative voices like Ned's, working to expose the truth about the rot spreading through this once great country. Remember that it's only by working together and by praying together that we can restore the United States of America to greatness under Almighty and Sovereign God. I'm Hayden Ludwig. Join us next time as the battle rages on.
First Right, a new kind of news summary without the liberal slant. Every morning, in your inbox, always free. Subscribe by texting First Right to 30161. That's First Right, all caps, one word, to 30161.